$92. And then,
Yes.
it just surprised me. All right, so what was this? What was King Kong diplomacy? They wouldn't what? The South wouldn't what? Did it work?
No.
And what was the ultimate Southern plan, which they never really followed, partially because it failed so miserably? Take Britain to the war, and what's the other part then? Hold out. And that just didn't quite work as well. Then we get to McClellan, we got the Army of the Potomac, we got to the key soldier in the entire war, right? Mr. Mustache? That is a great picture. And the Pinkertons were spies, and then, today is the anniversary of what? And the Japanese attacked the U.S. colony of the Hawaiian Islands, that the U.S. naval base there in the colony. To open, they were thinking to knock the U.S. out, so they could open up a route to get oil from the Dutch East Indies, which they were going to take. They thought the U.S. and the British would back out. By the way, the Dutch East Indies is what country today?
Is it Indonesia?
Everyone? Yeah, Indonesia. And if you're going to get tankers here, British colonies in Singapore and Hong Kong, and the U.S. colony in the Philippines is right there. They didn't want them to stop that oil. That's why they attacked the United States. This is my Pearl Harbor shirt, by the way. And so at that, we have Pinkertons, right? We have Johnston, didn't we? Right here.
Yep.
Do we talk about them at all?
Yeah.
Just private eye. He sent, because we paid for these guys, and those are some of the actual Pinkerton spies, and there are a bunch of guys here in Chicago, and they just sent them south to go spy on the Confederates, and they had no idea what they're doing. Don't you love this picture? I love the top hats. And a few U.S. Army officers with them. And just imagine these guys from Chicago walking around and saying, how big is the Confederate Army around here? And they stuck out like a sore thumb, and the Confederates figured out right away, and they immediately started doing what? We have more men than we know what to do with. We have 10,000 men coming every day. We don't know where to put them all. And remember, the Confederates had this very elaborate fortifications line right along the Potomac. And when they went back and told McClellan, that's awesome. When they went back and told McClellan that the Confederates had over 150,000 men, 3 times more than what they had, what did McClellan think?
Oh, no.
He thought, you're on the right track. He said, it was like, I knew it. I knew I was outnumbered. I told everybody I was outnumbered, and Lincoln didn't believe me. And so McClellan bought it 100% because that's what he wanted to hear. It confirmed his biases. It's called bias confirmation. Confirmation bias. You know, it happens all the time. And so he was even more reluctant to attack. And the Pinkertons would turn out to be a disaster. Well, I'm not going to talk very much about this, but in the Shenandoah Valley, this beautiful valley right here, and the Blue Ridge Mountains goes like this, turns into the South Mountain here, and there's this beautiful valley. While this is going on, Stonewall Jackson, with about 5,000 men, defeated armies 3 and 4 times his size in the valley, marching back and forth over March and April. There's Stonewall. And it's not that these battles were huge, but it infuriated Lincoln. He defeated an army under John C. Fremont. Remember him from 1856. And it gave Stonewall this great reputation, partially deserved, partially not. But also, right here, Lincoln fired McClellan as overall commander in April. Just fired him. Or, I'm sorry, in March. You're no longer the overall commander. You're just the commander of the Army of the Potomac. Worry about that. Don't worry about the West or any place else. But who replaced him? Who became the overall commander of Union forces? Lincoln, who had no idea what he was doing. He got textbooks on how to command. He had no idea. He wasn't an officer. And so for 1862, Lincoln tried to run the entire war effort, and it was a disaster. Jefferson Davis would try to do that for the Confederacy all the way up to 1865. But that's why I just mentioned Stonewall Jackson got his reputation, and finally McClellan began to move. And McClellan came up with a good plan. Confederate forces were all right here. And what he thought is, we have a really powerful navy. Let's land troops down here, march here, defeat them in front of Richmond. Not a bad plan. But before they could do that, the Confederates pulled back. and exposed all of those lines that were rippling with cannon and entrenchment and fortifications. And this is what they found. Those are actual pictures of the Confederate lines in 1862. Do you see the cannon?
It's a log.
They were logs painted black to look like cannon. The Union soldiers called them Quaker guns. Getting his Quakers are pacifists. I love this picture. He's acting like he's lighting one of them. Now, to any rational person, that seems to prove that the Confederates are what? Yeah, they're not near as weak as, or not near as strong as we thought. But to McClellan, that proves what? They're stronger than we thought. And they were trying to suck me into a premature attack and ambush and destroy my army. And the Union is done. That was, do you get an idea what Lincoln had to deal with? I'm just giving you little vignettes of McClellan. The problem with McClellan is he did build a great army. And he was talking about dictators. So finally McClellan would begin his strategy. And this actually almost worked. The Union, remember, what was the ultimate goal of the Union? They're fighting for what? For union. Slavery is not yet a goal. If he could win the war, knock out, destroy the main Confederate army, and the war ends, slavery has not been dealt with. Who knows what course of history we would have? And he nearly did it. Because keeping some men up here, Washington was always scared of, or Lincoln was always scared of Washington falling. Used the Navy to land down here. Remember Butler, who did the contrabands for that runaway? He was right here. The fort was right here called Fort Monroe. So the U.S. still had this. This is that James Peninsula. Remember Jamestown? And he was going to march overland, threaten Richmond. Johnston would have to panickily come down south, come south, defeat him in open ground, win the war right there. It's actually a pretty good plan. And it almost worked. It's going to be called the Peninsular Campaign. I'll show you that in 1 second. But right here, there's going to be a naval battle that will show how the war and everything had changed. So first off, it's the Peninsular Campaign. And this is one of those things that almost, who knows how things would be different. It's one of the things where, this is one of the rare times in history where just a few battles differently could change the entire course of American history. And so, the Merrimack and Monitor are two brand new types of ships. Actually, the Merrimack, it was the hull of a ship that U.S. Navy was just constructing that they abandoned after they fled Norfolk, Virginia. The Confederates took this hull and put a total new superstructure on top with iron armor. And this is what we have to write. This is the first battle. I'll get this term down. Ironclads. Iron and C-L-A-D, clad. Iron armor. By then they had steamboats. And this picture shows some of the steamboats in the background. And they would turn wheels or turbines or something. But they're still wooden. And they still had masts with sails to kind of give extra oomph to the use of the wind power. These are totally different. What the Confederates did is they took iron sheets, whatever they could find, boilerplate, anything, and literally riveted this to the side. You know, they formed kind of a triangle on top. So cannonballs just bounced off. They had been talking ironclads, but the engines weren't strong enough to do it. They're just starting to get strong enough engines. Actually, the Confederates didn't have enough strong enough engine. The thing barely moved. It leaked. Smoke would come into the cabin and would asphyxiate the crew. I mean, it had all kinds of problems. But when it came out for the first time, it sunk 2 Union ships in 1 hour and didn't get a scratch. But Union spies had picked it up. And the next day, when the Merrimack came out, actually, technically it's called the Virginia, but everybody called it its old name, the Merrimack. A new Union ship, an ironclad, specially made, called the Monitor. And they would fight the first battle of these new industrial behemoths. The Monitor is a little different. You notice how it's really low in the water, and it has, what's that? It's a turret with 2 cannon that could turn 360 degrees. So it could fire in any direction, not just cannon on the side of on either side. It was a revolutionary weapon. In fact, every navy in the world is at that moment obsolete. because their wooden hulls can't possibly match them. Every navy in the world. The Royal Navy was toying with ironclads. Boy, did they begin to hurry up on them. And they would find a relatively inconclusive battle because literally the cannonballs still bounced off the armor. It's pre-high explosive, so they still can't destroy it. And miserable. The bull ships leaked. They're smoky inside. Men were blinded inside. And the Merrimack was leaking so much water that it barely limped back to harbor after the battle and could never come out again. So technically the Union won. But why this battle is so big, and this is what we have to get. After this battle, it showed that industrial might will become the most important factor in war. Industry. And with it, the technology involved. Industry and technology. If you have the industry to build iron and then steel weapons, you have a distinct advantage over everybody else. It doesn't matter how brave they are, how smart they were. They might have the best tactics. It won't matter if you have more equipment, if you have more men, if you can make more troops. From this time on, industry is the key to war. And every country that's behind the Industrial Revolution, they are at a distinct disadvantage. It's no coincidence that it was about this era, in fact, right after it, that Europe and then also the US started conquering areas of Africa and Asia, making them colonies because they had the weapons. Industry. And what is it called? That if you are bigger, have the most, you have a competitive advantage over everybody else. Laissez-faire is no, yeah, someone said about their economies of scale or that. Economies of scale works in war. You have the most weapons, you win. Almost always. And if you have the industry, you win. But this is how wars are going to be fought then. It doesn't matter how brave your soldiers are. If you're brave but have a spear, you're not going to do a lot against somebody with a machine gun, which is coming in 7 years after this. Doesn't matter how brave you are. But if industry is now key, what becomes the target? What becomes a legitimate target for war? Factories, cities. Everything changed. Yeah, civilians were always victims in wars, always. But now they're a legitimate target in this new war. We're leading to something called total war. And civilians are going to pay the brunt of modern war. It's just starting, you can see it. So this is kind of a big battle. By the way, the Monitor, I think you probably see its problems when there's a wave. It was really low down, which makes sense, it's hard to hit. But when it went down to go down to blockade duty in North Carolina, off of Cape Hatteras, it was caught in a storm. One big wave went over it and then gone. I mean, literally just gone. All 100 men in it died like that. Just gone. They found it about 12 years ago. Some divers, they found it, and it's actually pretty amazing. It's still there, But the United States started building many more of these, and the U.S. would build a lot of ironclads. Confederates couldn't do it; they didn't have the industry. So the Peninsular Campaign. Lots of stuff happened, but they had to move up this peninsula towards Richmond. Johnston's still up there. He doesn't think it's a major assault. It seems like it's too far away. But McClellan, when he landed first in March, it took him 3 weeks to go this far. That's about 20 miles. Because he's McClellan. And when they got to about Yorktown, remember Yorktown, that last major battle of the Revolutionary War? Confederates had slaves dig an elaborate trench line here from Yorktown to, remember Jamestown? This is all one big historical park. If you ever get a chance, go there. It's really cool. But he got up there and saw this huge, elaborate trench line. And he thought, how many Confederates must be there? Yet, McClellan had 80,000 men. How many Confederates? There must be 160,000. There were less than 10. If he would have pushed aggressively, he could have got through, and who knows how things would have been different. Instead, he totally stopped and dug in and prepared to bring up all these heavy artillery to try to blast away, using his superior intelligence against the Confederates. These are big siege mortars, and they had to build a foundation, and they would lob shells really high to plunge down on the Confederate defenses. But I think this picture is funny. Here are Union soldiers playing poker, waiting. 4 weeks they waited. The Confederate commander there, a guy named Magruder, wasn't a great general, but he was a great thespian, an actor. And what he did is he totally convinced McClellan that he had thousands of troops. He had men in the trenches scream out false orders to nobody, acting like there was huge men, yell out, "First regiment, line up!" And there's no one there. So the Union forces heard that. He had one train engine, the engine, come into Yorktown Station. The Union couldn't see it, but they could see the billowing of smoke, hear the whistle. And then they would have men scream out orders for regiments to get off the train that didn't exist. And then the train would back up and then do what 5 minutes later? Do it again. Then, this is my favorite. They had men hold poles. So imagine this is a pole, then with a board across, and then they nail muskets on it with old muskets with bayonets. And so they could just see the muskets stick out from the trench line. And then they'd walk back and forth like it was all these men marching back and forth across the trenches. And they bought it completely. It worked 100%. In fact, McClellan even used, for the first time in war, hot air balloons. They talked about this in the Crimean War a decade earlier. The problem is hot air balloons they're still not very effective. The Intrepid had some issues. It was a canvas balloon. I think you see a problem with canvas balloons with a little bit of rubber. And the problem is, they would put it over a fire. All the hot air would come in, and they literally put a cork in, tie it in there. They would kind of go up, and then what's going to happen? It'll start going down, and it's a balloon. What do you have to do to a balloon? You shoot a hole in the balloon, and it tends to go down very quickly. They would tie messages to sandbags and drop them down. That's how they got the messages. I mean, it's a pretty good idea, just not quite there. But the reason I'm mentioning it, you see all these pictures of Civil War battles for the rest of the war, and they'll have balloons in the background. And they're kind of funny. You see this balloon out there. They don't really use them that often. By the way, you had to be an absolute lunatic to get on these balloons. But when that balloon comes down fast, what are you going to do? Yes, the French had worked on parachutes, literally a sheet. They would hold it and jump off. Volunteers. The greatest part about that is there's always somebody who will say, "Oh, do it." One of you might be that person. Huh?
Water.
Water's a problem.
Water hurts.
Water might be fine at like 10 feet, but let's say you're at 300 feet.
Then you wouldn't do it. You just wait until you go down. You shoot a hole in it, so you gotta faster close.
Yeah, you go down really fast. I think there's some time issues you guys aren't accounting for. So, what happened was, though, even though all of McClellan's heirs, they finally slowly pushed the Confederates back to the gates of Richmond. And they still had a chance. And Johnston, outnumbered almost 2-to-1, counterattacked. There's 2 names for this battle, Fair Oaks or Seven Pines. And this was a huge, confusing, disastrous battle for both sides. Men got lost. They were used to commanding units this big. So it was just kind of a disaster. And they're still using tactics from the Revolutionary War and the Napoleonic Wars. But muskets in 1800 combat muskets had a range of maybe 50 yards. And then accurate would be like, okay, I could hit a barn accurate. Rifled muskets in 1862 with the new musket balls from France, invented by a guy named Alfred Minet, mini balls as the US called them. They were accurate to over 150 yards. They were marching, and some of these spots, and this lithograph shows it, to within 20 paces and blazing away at each other's faces. Bodies were just torn apart because this time they can't miss. And they're still lining up, basically only an arm's width apart and marching in. But that picture kind of shows it. You all see the brown uniforms. I'll explain that in a second, but do you see it? See the balloon? It wasn't even at the battle, but they put it in. It was an inconclusive battle. But I'm going to tell you the casualty numbers. Now, casualties killed, wounded, or missing, which is normally captured. And I'm going to tell you this number, not because you need to know the number per se, but to give you an idea how bloody things are going to become. So, at Bull Run, there was about 5,000 casualties. at Seven Pines, there's going to be over 11,000 casualties. And slightly more Confederate. Whoever attacks is usually going to have more casualties. But so go from 5 to 11. I'm going to tell you because we're leading to something. General Johnston is always one of those casualties. He took a mini ball right here in his hip, lodged in his pelvis. Now, if it would have been just a little bit higher, he would have died for sure. Hit the guts, it infects. That should tell you how antibiotics changes everything in the 1930s. We'll see. But it lodged in there. Probably since it lodged and they realized it right away when they did a little prodded through with this iron probe or this brass probe. I know, good tablets. He did not die, even though he would be basically incapacitated until 1863. In fact, the wound was so bad, he would live for another 27 years. And for the rest of his life, using the terminology of the day, it leaked. It leaked. And not just blood, of course. Yeah, let your imagination run. How was your lunch? Okay, with that, let me tell you how they amputated. No. And so, Davis chose somebody who nobody wanted. There's such a myth around this man that people think, oh yeah, everybody wanted him. No. In fact, when he appointed Robert E. Lee to command the forces around Richmond, the men were furious that this old man is taking over. In fact, they started calling him Old Granny Lee. Old Granny Lee, and all kinds of other nicknames for Lee. And Lee appeared at first to be very slow and not doing anything. Remember, he's outnumbered. Both sides got reinforcements, and the Union got more reinforcements. Richmond is to his back. Lee would dub his army, though, give it the name the Army of Northern Virginia. So those are the two most important armies of the Civil War. The Army of the Potomac for the North, and the Army of Northern Virginia for the South. And I put these pictures up there because you can see the uniforms. We're in the Union Army with the blue wool uniforms for the most part, good, well uniformed. Confederates didn't have the resources. So virtually all the men wore whatever clothes they had. Very few men had actual uniforms. If you've probably heard of the blue and the gray. Very few Confederates had gray. Most of them were in homespun, homemade clothes, and they were brown because they would dye them with a nut from a tree called the butternut, and then you get this kind of brownish dye. And so a lot of times you hear Confederates called butternuts. And so they're brown. And here you can see this kind of just very blah, which actually brown is probably pretty good camouflage. I love he's got a flannel shirt on. And this one I really like. They're just wearing whatever clothes they happen to have. And he's got like a suit on. He's the officer. That's a mortar. I just think those are pretty amazing photos. Really short in supply. Whatever they just happen to have. But Lee did something that surprised everybody. He waited a month, got rid of some commanders who didn't do very well or he didn't trust, and he counterattacked. These counterattacks will eventually evolve into 7 almost continuous days of fighting. Not huge, dramatic battles, but still continuous fighting for 7 days. Thus, the 7 days. And here's Richmond. Lee is to his back to Richmond. If he loses, he might lose the war. McClellan is stretching a semicircle around it. What Lee does is he attacks McClellan's flank here that first day. But the same kind of thing happened as in Faro. Men got lost, the attack didn't go well, and they were beaten back. In fact, Union generals, good ones like Kearny and Hooker, said, counterattack. That first day, Confederates were pushed back. Union line south. But what did McClellan think? We have no choice but to do what? He started to retreat. McClellan won and retreated. His officers were furious. So Lee, realizing, oh, wow, he attacked again. Same thing happened. McClellan retreated again. Retreated again. Almost every battle, the Union Army won and then retreated. In fact, at Savage Station, right here at Frazier's Farm, in the haste to retreat, the Union Army almost cut the retreating, the Confederates almost cut the retreating Union Army in half. and nearly won the entire war right there. I can't even imagine how our history would be done. Yes. It's just this baffling bit of battles around here. A terrible mistake by McClellan. The last battle at Malvern Hill, Confederates charged, a suicidal charge into Union cannon lined up wheel-to-wheel firing. What is that term? Even bigger than grape, or even worse than grape shot. Remember the term canister. They were firing canister. Each canister had 250 musket balls in it. Body parts were heaped in front of the Union line, and McClellan retreated again. It went from, we're almost going to win the war. We're right at Richmond, too. We're huddled in Harrison's Landing. And Lee turned the entire tide of the war. The entire tide. But now, remember I told you casualties? Get these casualties. Okay, 7 days, and but there wasn't like one really big battle. Like smaller battles, 37,000 casualties. 16,000 of them were Confederate. By the way, can the Confederates afford that kind of loss? I mean, they got a real problem. That's the price for Lee. Remember what I told you, they had to hold out? How can you hold out if you have momentum? It's a real problem that the Confederates have. So, McClellan retreated. There's Harrison's Landing. In fact, Lincoln went down there in August and begged McClellan to do something. And McClellan proceeded to lecture Lincoln on what a bad president Lincoln was and that we might need a dictator. And Lincoln went back really scared, not only because of the war, and there's a midterm election coming up, and what if McClellan just decides to take his army to Washington, D.C. and make himself dictator? And people were telling McClellan to do it. McClellan was hearing this. They were saying, Lincoln's an imbecile, and he's going to lose the country. Do it. This is actually kind of scary when you think about it. And Lincoln is really having second thoughts about the entire cause of the war. And so what does he do? He orders McClellan, okay, you can stay here, but he had to start giving up some of his troops. And he had them shipped back to Washington and gave a new general, John Pope. Yeah. Okay, I have a question. John Pope. Pope took an island right here called Island Number 10 in the Mississippi. And the whole thing was Lincoln's like, he won a battle. Good enough. I'll give him command. Pope announced he's going to burn the Confederacy down and hang every traitor. This infuriated Lee, who called him the miscreant. The miscreant is about as big an insult as you could have in 1862. So you might see the miscreant Pope. He wasn't that bad. He was just incompetent. And Pope began to advance this way. And McClellan's still here. He has about 70,000 men, and Lee does something amazing. He realizes McClellan's not going to do anything. He turns his back on McClellan, outmaneuvers Pope in a series of incredible moves. I don't have time to tell you about the whole story. Pretty amazing. I know I set up. It's amazing, but you don't deserve to know. There's a lot of things to tell you. But we're coming up to a convenient battle, the second Bull Run of Manassas. Yeah.
So the Battle of Shiloh in New Orleans, when was that happening?
At the same time. So we're going to do the East first, and then come back and do the West. I tried to do back and forth, but it was kind of hard. So I wanted to, even though these battles are important, this is the decisive theater. Now, this one shows like a decisive Union charge. Just get this. It wasn't like that at all. Pope got outmaneuvered, his flank was hit, and it was another disastrous defeat for the Union forces. Another disastrous defeat. This battle was like basically 2 days. Get the casualties in this battle. Over 26,000 in 2 days. Are you catching what's going on here? 5, 11, 36 in 7 days, and now we have over 26. 2 days. 16,000 of them are Union. Lee is left with only less than 40,000 total men. Half of them don't even have shoes. But this time, unlike Bull Run where they ran away, the Union Army retreated in good order, but Pope, by the way, is gone. Pope immediately was fired. I mean, he fought his one battle, gone. They sent him to Minnesota to fight the Yankton Sioux. Gone. But before we get to that, the best Union general, probably at that time, was a guy who lost his arm fighting in the French Foreign Legion in Algeria. He just kind of went off and took a leave of absence from the U.S. Army to fight with the French. His name, we kind of skipped a few things, was Phil Kearny. There he is without his arm. And Kearny, who just was, he was so mad at McClellan and Pope, he couldn't hardly contain himself because he knew we should attack. As they were retreating towards Washington, D.C., he rode out to find the Confederate line. He wanted to counterattack. When he was riding back, just as the sun was going down, Union pickets saw a shadowy figure ride at him, and what did they do? They opened fire. Kearny tried to escape them and was killed by his own men. It's one of those, not only what ifs in history, but some of you might know what I'm getting to, but this is what we call foreshadowing. It's a very effective literary tool. But if you go to Arlington National Cemetery, one of the biggest statues, monuments is for Phil Kearny. There's my picture. I just thought this was a pretty good picture of the same statue, different angle. But you can see this is from 1956. And people going to Arlington with all the monuments, and there's Kearny. It's another one of those what ifs. There's a lot of them. Because he was maybe the best. And the big thing about being the best, end the war and save thousands of lives. Yes? No.
So how long, like what battles did it lead?
He was only a commander of a division, big, like what, 10,000 men? But he was, but almost certainly would have commanded the whole army of the following days, without a doubt. And that would have been, I mean, who knows? Hard to say, but if the war would have ended 2 years earlier, who knows what could happen? Yeah. The what ifs always just kind of fascinating. So, Lee, 40,000 men, half without shoes, naturally you have no choice but to invade the North. Now, this sounds really desperate. Let me rephrase that. This is really desperate. He didn't necessarily have to do it, but what he thought was this. His men, only 40,000 are invincible. And they pretty much scraped all the food off from here, so why not invade the North? If we win a big battle up here in Pennsylvania, maybe who will enter the war? And that's what you got to get down. What he thought was, here they are crossing the Potomac. We invade the North. We invade the North, get Britain into the war. Win that one big victory like at Saratoga that got the French in. Now, looking back, this was a horrible idea. But they were like, we can win the war, let's do it. And so, I didn't put a slide up there, but everybody write Lincoln down. Lincoln also had a choice to make. After these two battles and reversals in the West, he is getting very desperate. And not quite desperate, but very worried. Union's not enough. And Lincoln decides we need to widen the war. We have to widen the war. We need a greater cause. What's that cause he's thinking about? Emancipation, exactly, slavery. But here's the thing. If he does it after two horrible defeats, what does it make him look? Totally desperate, like he's grasping at straws. He needs a what? At least a victory. So, Lincoln needs a victory to turn the war into a war for freedom and change the entire course of our history. He needs a victory to get Britain into the war and a Confederate victory. Wow. We're coming up to the most important battle in American history. No. Very good guess, but no. A couple more things about this then. Guess who took back over command? Yeah.
If he needed a victory, why did he put him back in the
Good question. He went through everybody, and it was like, he didn't trust generals in the West yet. I know eventually Grant, but not yet. And he's like, I have no choice. I gotta put McClellan back in. The men love him. What's that? He was actually 34, 35. McClellan was 35 years old, yeah.
Why does McClellan keep on saying yes?
Yes.
After he's removed 3 times.
Oh, he's incredibly arrogant.
Oh, okay.
It's an ego thing.
Yeah, you really screwed up firing me and I'll show you.
Oh, okay.
Which is a pretty common attitude, you know. I'll show you, yeah.
People actually like him,
Love him. The men love him.
but weren't they complaining about why he waited so long?
Well, you know, maybe a few of the generals know, but men don't know. In fact, that's one thing you'll find out about war. The soldiers know nothing. What's going on. You know, and everybody else. In fact, only a few people know because they're in their own little bubble. I mean, for obvious reasons. So McClellan made it feel good, and yeah. So this map, this easy to follow map. Okay, it looked good when I put it on. I can still use it, right? Here's Washington, D.C. Here's the Potomac. So Manassas is right here. McClellan now is organizing his forces. He has over 90,000 men, but he's got reinforcements coming all the time. Lee divided his small force up into a number of different units, take Harper's Ferry and a few others, partially to terrify people, but also to get as many supplies as he can. He's out of supplies. And so steel, but moved in here. And there's this long mountain, Blue Ridge, and then this is the South Mountain right here. McClellan starts moving this way. And in fact, they start camping in the same exact site that Confederate Army camped 1 or 2 days before. In fact, soldiers were using the same fire rings as Confederates did. That's actually not a good place to camp. You don't want to camp for another army that just scraped everything clean, but they were kind of desperate. And at one of the, oh, this is a really cool picture. This picture is one of the rare ones you see of actually a candid shot of men marching. A photographer involved in Frederick, Maryland, took a camera on a roof and took a picture of Confederate forces marching through that 1862. You don't get pictures like this. So this is the real deal. They're not posing at all. And you can see how their uniforms, see the blankets? They didn't have backpacks. So they'd lay their blanket down, put whatever gear they had, wrap it in the blanket, they'd tie it around their shoulder. And that's how they carried their gear. So you can really see it here. That's just a great picture. And exhausted, hungry men. And don't forget, half don't have shoes. Well, the next day, Union forces arrived and many camped in the same campsite. So this is around a campfire. It's not the exact one, but it's a campfire. And think about like 10 soldiers sitting around a campfire, cooking their delicious salt pork and eating their delicious hardtack. You know what hardtack is? Hard crackers that supposedly wouldn't rot. And I mean hard, like teeth are overrated hard. Okay, I'll get this. And salt pork, just imagine pork, they put pork fat and salt and let it sit for a long time. And so it'd be preserved. What's the saltiest thing you've ever eaten? Yeah, now add salt. And so they're cooking this, but one of them sees something that was a major coup. He found something that they couldn't, it was hard to get. Sitting there with 3 cigars held together with a piece of paper. You can imagine how hard it would have been to get cigars in the North in the Civil War. And he grabbed these cigars, and instead of throwing the piece of paper in the fire, he just happened to open it up. And in it were all of Lee's plans for how he divided his forces up. A staff officer on Lee's staff wrote all the plans down to save it as a souvenir of the battle that's coming up. And lost the cigars he thought he would never lose. Now, McClellan had the plans. This might surprise you, but he believed them. All he had to do is aggressively get over the mountains, get between the divided Confederate forces, and they could win the war right there. And if he would have done that, I don't know what the future would be, except for one thing. There would have been a President McClellan. And so McClellan very slowly moved towards the mountain. And Lee, once he realized it, began to move the forces together very quickly. And we're leading up to the events that will become the Battle of Antietam. Antietam, maybe the most important day in American history. September 17th, 1862. There's Antietam Creek. There's a little tiny town there called Sharpsburg. So the Confederates called the Battle of Sharpsburg, but everybody, it's just Antietam. And this is an interesting picture of a charge out of the cornfield, and that's Dunker Church, a pacifist church right there on the edge of the battlefield. A little bit ironic. Still there. They still have services there. Yeah, you can go visit. It's pretty amazing. And you still see some bolt holes still in it. Well, we're going to jump past this map. But to get over the mountains, this mountain called South Mountain, they had to go over a couple little passes, and McClellan didn't push the men over South Mountain. This was on the 14th. If he would have pushed through about 100 Confederate cavalrymen, they could have got between Lee's lines. Instead, partially his fault, partially not, they got hung up on this pass and allowed the Confederates to get together. I was on this a year and a half ago, so last April, like April 1st or 2nd on spring break, and I was taking my dad there who had never been there, so I took him to Gettysburg and Antietam. He'd never been there. And we were going up South Pass, and we're driving down this valley in this mountain, and we saw this white line, I mean, thick, I mean, white. And like, ooh, a little fog on the mountain. And we go up this really narrow road. It's really pretty. I kept telling my dad, God, it's so pretty. There's waterfalls and all this stuff, you know. And you can see this white line just there, wall coming into the thickest fog I've ever seen in my life. I mean, the definition of pea soup fog. I couldn't have seen you from here. Yeah. And we're driving, like, fog! You're trying to drive, turn on the lights. It was like, couldn't go anywhere. I finally we just pulled over, couldn't drive. And cars were still whizzing by at 70 miles per hour. And you literally could see nothing. But the worst part is I told my dad how beautiful it was, and all we could see is beautiful white. And then, like, we got over and got into Antietam, and the fog was gone. We looked back in the mountains, it's a sunny day. Fog moves. So, after wasting these days, finally, I'll tell you this right for the bell rang, Lee still only didn't have all his men there. He had just over 30,000. There's still 10,000 at Harper's Ferry. And McClellan had about 90,000 men. And McClellan had a pretty good plan. But right after the battle, Matthew Brady had a photography studio in Philadelphia. And he sent cameramen there just a couple days after because it's really close. Let me show you this. He took pictures. Nobody had ever seen anything like this before unless they were on a battlefield. And they became a sensation. That's on the cornfield. You see the bodies? That's a day and a half after. Look at them loaded in the hot autumn sun. Here are Confederates right in front of Dunker Church. You had all these dramatic, glorious pictures. It's much worse. Yeah.
That's absolutely crazy.
But great. Well, no. Well, not only that, it shows people what war is really like. People think war is glorious and wonderful. It's not. It's terrible. Oh, perfect. Okay. I have not had a chance. I had a lot of great plans.
When do you want me to take the class?
We can. I'm talking a little bit about liberal and conservative economics. We might actually kind of talk about want to watch a movie now. We got to watch a movie. It's a documentary. Really good. I'm looking at so what do you think? But you want to do it now, or do you want to? Let's get it done. Let's just get it done right now, because I'm gonna give a few more minutes to finish off those things I gave, those terms. I gave you that on Wednesday.
Okay. And I can get those from Natalie. Well, no, like I have the paper.
Oh, okay.
I just don't have anything written on the paper.
I had a big stack of the tests. I thought I got your I'm not crazy.
I can write on this?
Yes, please. But short IDs on the subject sheets, I like having one.
Yeah.
Oh, who did Place It on Lucky Dan? Who did math?
Oh, that's what it was. Oh, right. This is officially big. We just I know I'm very.
Hey, I was working. Get out, everyone out there. Everyone out. Everyone out of my room.
Yes.
Bunch of punks. I have one. I work and work and work. Clear out, everybody. You too, Sophie. Delaney. Get out of my, leave my presence, you bunch of punks. Well, that was easy. Okay, let's get, finally we need something. No, we're gonna limbo. Get out.
Every limbo girl all around the limbo world. Gonna do the limbo rock all around the limbo block. Jack me limbo, jack me quick. Jack the limbo stick all around the limbo block. Hey, let's do the limbo rock. Lower down. Lower down. How low can you go? First you spread the limbo feet, then you move to limbo feet, limbo ankle, limbo knee, then back like the limbo tree. Jack me limbo, jack me quick, jack go on the limbo stick, all around the limbo block. Hey, let's do the limbo rock.
Okay, let's be mindful of the limbo. Are you ready? Wait, get back, get out of here. I hit it.
Yourself a limbo girl. Give that chick a limbo world. There's a limbo on the bottom. Jack goes on the limbo love. Jack be limbo, Jack be quick. Jack go on the limbo stick. All around the limbo block. Hey, let's do the limbo rock. Don't do that limbo bar.
All right, here we go.
You'll be a limbo
Ready?
star. How low
Huh?
can you
Let's go! $90 in the full deluxe Beatles Whiteout, the new master remix. $92. That's what it costs. If I get that from each of you, I should have enough to pay for it. I don't care how you get the money. No questions asked. There's a lot of freshmen. Just saying. Work on the big con. What's up again?
Too good for too long.
No, actually, it's surprising. So I want the LP. Are we really though? So I'm trying to decide. Are we? Okay, a couple things here. The test, there's still a couple people who have to take the test, and also we have to do stretches. Pretty nice. Let's go ahead and take out that list of terms, and I'm gonna answer any questions you have right now on them. Maybe I'll give you a few more minutes to look at them, then I'm gonna talk a little bit about, gotta do just a little bit of background of liberal and conservative economics and a few just very basic things. And then we are gonna watch a movie. It's a very good documentary. It's the best I've seen in the crash. It's called Inside Job. And yeah, it's by far the best. Have you seen it? Do you want to see it? You do. It's really good. And there will be something along with it. But the thing about it is that even though they explain some of these things, they go. Yeah, so that's why I want to go through these terms so we have a lot of them. And we'll go through some basic elements of it. And we'll do that next week, and so we'll watch and have a worksheet to go along with it. And we're gonna have actually a pretty funny test for this unit. We'll have a test on this. And then after this, we're gonna do a little bit, just a few things on toys. So everybody bring in all your toys.
Thank you.
Yeah. The valuable ones.
Not in this generation.
Well, part of the reason old toys are valuable is because no one's safe.
Yeah, the Beanie Baby stuff.
Well, that.
Some Beanie Babies are
And they were radioactive.
People are weird.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Aren't they?
Yeah,
You want some radium, kiddo?
Okay, so let's go take that. Are there any ones you cannot find? All right.
What's
You have them all? Residential mortgage-backed securities. Those are securities that are mortgage-backed involving residents. Anything else? All right. So let's go backtrack a little bit. What's a mortgage? Well, a mortgage is the actual name for the loan when somebody borrows money to buy a house. It's called a mortgage. So when people say they're paying back their mortgage, those are the payments. And so that's a mortgage. What's a security?
It's a negotiable financial instrument that represents some type of financial value.
Wow, that's a very easy definition of it. Yeah, it's basically some kind of piece of paper that's worth something. It's some kind of paper with some kind of legal backing that's worth something. The best examples of these are going to be things like a stock or a bond. That is a security. Keep a hold on. A promissory note. Do you know what a promissory note is?
Yes.
The piece of paper that you sign saying, I agree to pay back your debt. That is a security. Heck, if a bank gets a piece of paper, so if I'm a bank and I get a piece of paper from Tasha saying that Tasha owes me $1 million, and she's going to make payments of $1,000 a minute. Well, why not, right? Wow. And by the way, so that's money. Everyone catch what I said? That's money. That's security. A security is what we call an asset. That's an asset. That's a really important point there. So it means, why is this worth money?
Because.
Well, partially because we say it is, and it's a legal contract, but it's worth money because you're going to pay that money back down the road. So if I get this piece of paper, I know I'm going to get money for you, and it's worth something. It's an asset. Why is a stock an asset? Because you believe it is basically a share of a corporation, and you believe that that company will be around tomorrow so you can get that money back. What is a bond? It's usually government loans issue bonds, but it could also be a business can issue bonds. And this is another thing, let's say I'm a government, go ahead.
It's like buying.
You're, in a way, it's buying debt. If I want to borrow money, but I issue bonds to borrow money, I give this to Tasha with the idea being at a certain time, 3 years, 3 months, 6 months, 3 years, 10 years, 30 years down the road, I promise to pay that back. And so the big thing about this is it's not worth anything as a paper, it's worth anything because we all believe I'll pay it back. But what is money?
A social construct.
It's just because we all have great imaginations.
That's true.
And so, here's another thing about the bonds. Let's get back to this. Just stick with bonds. But all kinds of debt, anything like this is the same kind of thing. Okay, I issue this and I say in 3 months I'll pay it back. There's a pretty good chance I'm going to be here in 3 months, right? I have to give a little bit of interest to convince you to take that money back. What rate can I charge? Or what, I'm sorry, what rate can she charge I have to give? Pretty low. Because I'm probably going to pay it back. In 3 months, I'll pay it back. But how about 30 years? Are you going to say, no, in 30 years, not only might you not be here, I might not be here. What kind of, as the years go out, what happens to the interest? And so the shorter the term of the loan, the smaller the interest. Now, we're still talking about securities here because we asked a very good question about mortgage-based. Ooh, God, that's awful. All the terminology is terrible, but it all means the same basic thing. So, interest, the longer the interest is, or I'm sorry, the longer the mortgage, the longer the debt is, the higher the interest. And the thing about it is, that means there's a less chance to pay back the debt. The more risky the loan, the higher the interest. And that works for security, that works for promissory notes, that works for bonds, that works for every one of these securities in some ways. If you're going to buy a stock in a brand new company that you're not sure they're going to make it, what's going to happen to the value of that stock? You're not going to pay as much. It has the same net effect. Yes?
So, you might have already said it. What's the difference between mortgage-backed securities and residential?
So let's get to that. Yes?
So mortgage-backed securities, like security on mortgage that you pay on a property, or?
You're really close. Let's backtrack a little bit to asset-backed securities. ABSs. Oh, I kind of jumped the gun. I was thinking about answering the question. Remember when I said the stock? And I said, the stock's kind of risky. Don't think in terms of the actual value of the stock. Let's say I want to speculate in the stock market. Do we know what speculation is? Buy low, sell high. Think you're going to try to make money on the value. Buy something really cheap, hoping the value goes up. If I'm going to buy stock in a risky company, and I go to my banker and say, hey, I'd like to buy on margin, and I want to buy a stock. And they say, what company? And I say, a very stable company, whatever it might be. I don't know where we're at right now. Let's say I throw out, especially a year ago, I would have said Apple. So, oh yeah, you're probably going to get, that would be there. But let's say I say, Matt's company started privateering. They're going to roam the open seas and rob money, rob ships. And they'll say, I think there's a pretty good chance he's not going to make it. First off, he's from Montana. And secondly, so what kind of interest are they going to require from me to get that loan? And that means I have to pay back more. So it has the same effect. So let's get back to asset-backed securities. So remember, a security is a bond, a stock, any of these financial instruments, which is that always bugs me when they say that. It just sounds wrong. I think instruments, and I can't help it, I think of either musical or surgical. But I guess in a way it kind of is surgical. But a asset-backed security, what it is, all right, let's say I have a bunch of assets, like these promissory notes. I know I have promissory notes. So I take these promissory notes and I go to an investment bank. Investment bankers deal with securities, bonds, financing companies. And I say, I want to turn these promissory notes into another form of security. And what do? They create another bond, a security, to sell. They sell to investors. And what backs them up? This asset. So I take something of value and I'm basically borrowing money off of it. You don't catch what I'm doing? I'm borrowing money off the asset. And how do I do it? Because you have to pay back your debt. By the way, if you go broke, oh no. Can we see like a falling dominoes here? But anyways, that's what an asset-backed security is. So I take some kind of asset, and then I use that to back up. By the way, I don't want to make it direct. I have this piece of paper, I turn to this piece of paper. What if this is $1 million? Can I turn that into a bunch of $100,000 bonds? Couldn't I, stealing this, I have a bunch of them. Couldn't I chop them up into a bunch of little pieces and combine them up into, and they'll back up a bunch of other different bonds? Isn't this fun? See which one you get. There.
I can see where this is.
Wait. Are we done? We just created a bond. What are these? They're what? Aren't they new securities? What do we call a security? A security is what we call an asset. What can I do with this asset?
Break that other out.
Oh, no way. I could break it up again, couldn't I?
You could break it up. That's those. You can break those.
What?
I feel like I'm back in a.
Yes.
So, for, let's say you have.
Keep track of that.
You have a security on somebody, right?
That security on somebody. Sounds like a hit.
And then you break it in bonds. Right? And then this person who the asset is doesn't pay you back. Is there any like credit repercussions for you?
Oh, yeah. But I wonder if they'll have insurance for that. Okay, so moving on. Moving on. So what's a mortgage-backed security? So once again, Tasha borrowed money to buy a house. Boy, you got to keep track of your finances. And by the way, you came to me. So borrow money. I got this mortgage. I do the same thing. I chop it up in little pieces and make bonds. That's a mortgage back. So which one did you have? You started
Residential
this.
Mortgage-backed securities.
A what?
A residential.
So the mortgages are from what?
Residents.
Homes. Regular homeowners. God, this is really awesome. You could do You could do asset-backed securities on other asset-backed securities on other asset-backed securities, and then buy insurance on your asset-backed security, and then turn that insurance into asset-backed securities, and then buy insurance on your fake asset-backed securities. See, do you wonder why they took some of the best mathematicians in the world and they got them into finance? And by the way, this is what we call arbitrage. And what you're doing is you're taking things, whatever it might be, but something that you own or have control, and you're trying to make money off of it. You're not producing anything. You're not making anything except for wealth. And this is what we call the rentier economy. You're making money off of rents. You're not making stuff. You're not producing good things for the economy. You're making money because you own stuff and trying to find ways to make money off of stuff. Had your hand up first?
I was just gonna say, you mentioned that turned into almost asset-backed securities. That's what it felt like. It's almost what you were saying.
Yeah.
It kind of dissolves away.
Oh yeah, it all comes that way, yeah.
So then the residential mortgage-backed securities, is it the homeowners that are doing the asset, or is it like the people who are?
Homeowners have nothing to do with it.
Okay, so it's like.
What happens is, okay, let's say you go, who here has bought a house last month? Only a few of you? So you go buy a house, and let's say you go to, Valley Bank. I'm just throwing a bank that's nearby, right? Valley Bank. There's so few banks anymore. I hope that's still, no, Valley Bank is. You get a mortgage from there. What Valley Bank does is, 40, 50 years ago, they used to hold that mortgage and you'd pay back the bank. No. You get a 30 years, so you're going to pay it off 30 years. Remember, the mortgage, then your interest rate's a little bit higher, right? And let's say you bought a 15-year. Most people have 30. I'll tell you what, when you go buy that first house, or that house, it's a wow moment when you realize, oh, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be paying this. And that's why, just be very wary. But they take that mortgage today, and they don't keep it. They don't keep it for a day. What do they do with it? They invest. They sell it to one of the big investment banks immediately. So my wife and I, when we bought this is our second home, we bought the house I currently live in. We actually went through Valley Bank, and then it got sold to Washington Mutual, who went under in the financial crash, and now it's owned by Sun Trust, and that's who we pay back. We got, I think, a year left. And we're like, come on, one more year, we can do it. That's kind of like a big deal.
That's smart.
So we're like, yes, almost. But then you go to that investment bank, and then what do they do?
Sell it.
They take all these millions of mortgages and do what? Chop it up into little bits. And then do what? Use those to back all these asset-backed mortgages. Yes? Say it again. Well, okay, let's, so that answers the residential question. Hedge fund. Let's get to hedging. I think I mentioned hedging yesterday, didn't I? Yeah, hedging is basically hedging your bets. And the idea of that is this. You want to put yourself in a situation that you don't lose any money. So it comes from horse racing. And so if there's two horses that have a really good chance to win, you bet some money on both. So no matter who wins, you still win money. Yeah, you might not win as much with the other one, but you hedge your bet. So in stocks or that kind of thing, you kind of hedge your bets where either two companies might make money, you might invest in two competitors, or you might invest part of your money on a stock to go up, and you might short it. You know what shorting is? You bet that the stock's going to go down. So you hedge your bets. Yes?
So it's basically placing your assets in multiple different sources.
Yeah.
One,
Diversifying.
hoping one happens will then your gain.
With the idea being the gains would be big enough, you'll make money. But the thing about hedging, you have to have a lot of money to really do it. To really put enough money down on different things to make money. Because if you don't have much money, you try to hedge your bets, you're just not going to make that much. You know, hedging, the real hedging, and that's what hedge funds are. Hedge funds were originally going to be these big, you might have heard the term, you ever heard the term mutual funds? These big funds where they're going to own one stock manager, fund manager, will invest in a bunch of different companies. With the idea being that if you invest in a bunch of different companies, you'll hedge your bets and win. Even if some go down, some will go up. Everyone hear that? That's a hedge fund. At least that's what it started. That's not what a hedge fund is today, but that's how it started. Does anybody know what a hedge fund is today?
An aggressively managed portfolio of investments that uses leverage, long, short, and derivative positions. Did you come up with that?
Investopedia. Yeah, Investopedia? Yeah. That's actually a site. Kind of funny. And it's written in such a way that's easy to understand. Hedge funds today are incredibly high-risk investments, where the manager says that I will make really risky investments, where the return might be really high interest rates. You might get a big return, but also you might get big losses. And the big thing about hedge funds is they actually don't make a lot of money except for the people actually running the hedge funds, because they charge massive fees. Yeah, hedge funds are, I mean, there are some that made a lot of money, but most of them actually make less than the average growth of the stock market. But they have this allure that, okay, you might not lose or make that much, but you might get just more money than you know what to do with.
Could be about multi-millionaire.
Yeah, or a billionaire. We're talking millionaires now. People who invest in hedge funds have got to have a lot of money. And hedge funds have had a great impact on the country, because they'll get these funds with a huge amount of money, and they will do, start investing in other companies and sponging their money out and various things like that. Is there another one? Another question? Anyone? Yeah.
It's not like a question on the frame, but like it's back to the asset-backed security thing.
Yeah.
Basically, anytime, like anybody can just go out and buy like a stock and then create an asset-backed security on that.
Technically, yeah. But if you're gonna, you're gonna do it to go stand on the street corners, hey, I got your asset-backed security, you're probably not gonna go very far. But what they do is you go to investment banks like Goldman Sachs or places like that, and then for a very large fee, they will set that up for you and also do the initial the initial sale for you, the initial purchase offering it's called, and they'll do all that stuff for you. And that's what investment banks do. So our regular commercial banks like Valley Bank, they do mortgages and car loans. Investment banks, these are the big Wall Street banks who do those kind of things. Corporations set up and sell their stock or double their stock or things like that. Oh, there's so many financial instruments. It's hard to wrap your mind around. By the way, that's what we call on purpose. If nobody understands these things, who can ever regulate them? That's it. Just think about it for a second. Yeah.
What are investment grade ratings?
Oh, investment grade ratings. That's what does Investopedia say?
Well, I don't know. My sister thinks
You didn't memorize it?
I'm sorry. It says it's a quality of a company's credit rating.
So what happens is there are these big accounting firms that do these credit ratings on people. And they do it on stock, they do it on bonds, they do it on asset-backed securities. And they do these ratings on it. And they will decide whether or not they're high ratings or low rating, if they're good or bad investments. And obviously, if you get that accounting firm to say this bond is a high rating, you can sell it and make more money and have to charge less interest. The lower the rating, the more interest you have to give. Does that make sense? Because it's a bigger risk. And I think I have that on there. Yeah, somebody trying. Why did I do this in alphabetical order? I should have put this by theme, but I didn't. So I do have the credit rating agencies on there. And they have AAA, AA, etc. We'll talk more about these. We'll see this a little bit more in the video. But that's the highest ranking on down. AAA is the highest. Yes?
Leverage.
What's leverage?
I have your whiteboard.
I have your wife and son.
Huh?
I have your wife and son.
Wow. In a way, it's kind of that. Okay, leverage, yeah, it's collateral. It's basically collateral. And so what it is, okay, everybody's in debt in some way. And if you're leveraged, means you have to give a significant amount of collateral. That's leverage. So if you're really leveraged, you've had to borrow a lot of money, give a lot of collateral. Has everyone got that? Somebody must have a really good memory. I don't see any of that written down. I just said leverage. Oh, okay, man. And so with that, that's collateral. And companies do this all the time. You know, they'll put up leverage. And the thing about it is that leverage is really pretty cool. What's leverage? It's an asset. You see where I'm going with this? What's an asset?
This circle.
Wait.
The more you talk, the more.
But do you get the point about that? So you hear collateral, and all of you think, I'm going to put my car down or something like that, right? Which, by the way, buy a boat, put your car down. That's a really smart move. But anyways, so I know people have done that. Well, you got to become a pirate.
Privateer.
But think about companies. Think about banks. Wow. Couldn't they create assets? No, wait. Can't they create assets?
Yeah.
Think about what banks can do, especially investment banks, because there's very few regulations. So they could loan to somebody to start a company, can't they? They get a promissory note in return. That's an asset, right? What can they do with those promissory notes? Chop it up into little bits and create more assets. They sell those assets. Now, wait a second. Where do people get the money to buy those assets? They borrow it from them.
So all they're doing is taking their money, lending it out, getting the money back.
And then what can they do with those promissory notes? Do you see what's going on here?
Except they can still
Huh? Now, yes.
Wait, so if someone takes out a loan, right, and you use like the house's collateral,
Yeah.
can you pull out asset securities of both the loan and the house?
Yes.
Almost.
Okay, so is there another one? Yes.
No,
No way! Let's do collateralized debt obligations. CDOs. What does Investopedia say about CDOs? Because this should blow your mind up. Somebody have that? Okay, let's use the words we don't understand. Because I think I looked at the definition and it's kind of fun.
In general, I thought it said that you refinance mortgage-backed securities. That was like what the basic definition.
Yeah, you're refinancing mortgage. What do we get for that one? Yes, collateral debt, because that's refinancing mortgage-backed securities. By the way, what does that even mean, right?
A type of structured asset-based security vehicles for refinancing mortgage.
Wow. Did you catch what we just did there? So, CDO. Yes. Yeah, it's a form of asset-backed securities where you are using the promissory notes from people who promise to pay their mortgages.
And if they don't?
Is this, by the way, it should be confusing. It's unbelievable. By the way, they're not making cars, they're not making homes, they're not making clothes, they're not growing food. What are they doing? Now, if this was like 3 or 4% of the economy, whatever, go gamble at the big casino. What if it's 45% of the economy is doing this?
Well, then what happens? It all crashes.
Gee, that couldn't crash the entire world economy, could it? No way! Of course, you need a bubble. So you're taking these mortgages, and the mortgage is the collateral.
I mean, it's not that
Sounds so bad.
Well, asset-backed securities on every.
So it's another form. Which, by the way, are we to derivatives yet? We're not. Let's do my personal favorite. Credit default swaps. Now, here's the deal. Let's say you buy a CDO. You buy an asset-backed security. Let's say you buy one, and there's all kinds of different ways you do this. Let's say you buy this CDO. All right, everyone happy with when we bought a CDO? And now you know that. In fact, let's backtrack. You don't have any idea what's backing this up, do you? I mean, if you take a bunch of people's mortgages and chop it up into little pieces, look around everyone in this classroom for a second. Look around at all of you. Look around. Let's say all of you borrowed $100,000. You know each other, right? And you promise to pay it off over the next 30 years. You're looking at you. Might there be some of you, or maybe you're that person, who are like, geez, there's a good chance I'm not going to pay this off. Right? Right? I'm not looking at anyone in particular, but now, let's say I made a CDO, a collateralized debt obligation from all, I chopped up all the mortgages from you, put little tiny bits, so I took little pieces of all your mortgages and made a bunch of bonds to sell. Well, you might, yeah. Before you get to that, do I know all of you are going to pay it back?
No.
Is there a good chance somebody won't pay it back and the whole thing will fall apart?
Yes. No.
Would you want to be in that position? What do we call it when you're like, ooh, I don't want to lose money. I better invest in something else so I don't lose money. You want to do what? Hedge. That's a credit default swap. So investment banks solve these things. And then they turn around and say, but hey, this could be a risky investment. Why not pay me 4% of the value?
So the credit default swap is hedging?
Yes, it's hedging your bet and it's like insurance. You pay me this money, and if your stock goes down below a certain value, I will make up the difference. So I will essentially take over your credit default swap.
That was not right. This whole thing has been terrible.
Now wait, we're not done. Oh, we're not even to the complex parts.
Yes, we are.
Wait. Let's get back. Before we answer any questions, credit default swaps. Now wait a second. First thing is first. Do I have that money to pay back?
No.
This is all new. And actually, this was illegal.
Oh.
And then we had, a combination of deregulation in the Reagan administration and then the Clinton administration, where they got rid of all these rules. And so pretty soon, these investment banks did not have rules on credit default swaps. The idea was, we don't want rules that might slow down our investment. And so they started selling these credit default swaps and didn't have enough money to pay it back. Did everyone catch what happened there? So I don't have to pay it back. So if it crashes, I might be in hock for a lot of money. Now we got two more big things about this too. Wait for it. Credit default swaps. I sell this piece of paper to you that says it's worth money.
What happens when it crashes?
Asset-based securities off of credit default swaps.
You say that like it's supposed to make sense.
But doesn't it?
You make a promissory note, I think more.
Wait a second. There are no rules on credit default swaps. So, who bought a CDO from me? Okay, so Kate bought this from me. I know it's a hunk of junk. So I turn around to another investment bank and buy a credit default swap. Yeah, I know, right, Alex, on your CDO.
That's so smart.
So when I go under, you'll be good.
Yes.
So Alex turns around and he buys a credit default.
Yes. Or are we done yet?
No.
Then then Hayden turns around and buys a credit default swap on this credit default swap. And then I turn around and buy a credit default swap on his credit default swap for his credit default swap. That is what we call, wait for it, a synthetic credit default swap.
Maybe Karl Marx had.
Yes. Well, you're buying a credit default swap on a credit default swap. By the way, who's making money?
Nobody.
Wait, no. I'm making money like mad. Now you say, no, wait a minute, how are you making money? Wait a second. I'm not the bank. I'm just the guy who runs this corporation. The corporation is spending the money. What am I doing? I'm paying myself a bonus.
All the time.
Hey, I'm doing well. And if the corporation goes under, what do I do?
Oh, well.
That's tough. Moving on to the next company. Don't forget, when we talk about businesses, it's so easy to think about like little businesses, but no, most businesses are corporations. Corporations are entities, they're not people. And if corporations go under, the entity goes under. Heck, if I ran a corporation, what would stop me as a CEO from using every penny I had to raise my salary?
None.
What if I used every penny of revenue to buy more stock of my company? Oh, by the way, how am I paid? In stock. And if I did stock buybacks, what happens to the value of my stock? It goes up. I sell the stock, the company goes under, what happens to me?
Get rich.
Bye. In fact, I'll say, look how well I did with this company. And go get another job. Now you might say, wait a second, who would hire you for their company? Somebody would, because you got rich. Maybe I'll get rich. Or yes.
So have you ever seen the four-dimensional objects that's like 10 million faces?
We're not going to do
It's all kind of rotating. That's banking. The beast.
So everyone in the corporation.
All right, so what is a derivative? Hey, let's ask Investopedia. What is, Delaney, do you have a derivative? Do you have something written down? Did you get it from Investopedia? Please say you did. Please say you did. Okay, here's a derivative. Wow, what does that mean? Me either. Okay, derivative is another financial instrument. Now, here's the thing about derivatives. Actually, it's a pretty sound thing. Imagine you're a farmer. And if you're going to farm, so imagine you're a farmer, and this is the modern era, so you need a tractor, and tractors need oil, right? They need gas. Does that make sense to everybody? They need gas. Now here's the problem. It's December, and you're trying to plan, so you're starting to ready to plan for all your expenditures in the next year. And you know that you've got to make money. You have to make money when you harvest. And what happens if something unforeseen, war in the Middle East, who knows what happens? And all of a sudden gasoline prices go up by 400%. What's going to happen to your profits?
Oh, no.
And you're sitting there, oh God, you don't know. I mean, okay, prices might go down, but they might go up. What a derivative is this. Basically, and they have all these complex mathematical formulas, that's the derivative. If you did a calculation, I think you might know what I'm talking about. But what it is, it's a formula to try to come up with, or basically what you're trying to do is, you're trying to speculate on gasoline futures. And the derivative is the mathematical formula they come up with for future price of gasoline. And what they do is they come up with a formula saying, okay, we don't know what the price of its gas is going to be in August, but I say in December I'm going to pay this. That's a future. That's called the futures market. But the derivative is the formula they come up with that number. And what it is, I come up with that price. So even if the price goes up, I'm set on that price. If the price goes down, well, I lost. But that's part of the idea. I hedge my bets. So isn't everything kind of hedging? Yes.
So it's basically using math.
Yeah. That's why they get all these mathematicians doing it. And so with that is a derivative. And the thing about it is actually, this is a real problematic thing. Because it makes sense for farmers. Or let's say, you're canning food if you want to buy aluminum for the can. Things like that. Or any kind, things like that. But what if you're just a speculator? Couldn't you get into the derivative market and do what to the price?
Artificially inflated.
Jack up the price. Let's say you start cornering the derivative market on oil today. So I corner the market on oil today for about oil prices in the height of driving season in the United States, August. I buy every oil future I can. And then what do I do in August? I sit on the oil. And what happens to the price as supplies go down? Do you remember 5 years ago when the price of gas was all of a sudden $4.75 a gallon? Did you wonder why that happened? You thought it was just kind of like this natural occurrence or the storm came? No. No. Investment banks, especially Goldman Sachs. Do you remember 4 years, no, that's not your fault, this is 5 years ago, when there was a shortage of rice? I'm not kidding, there was a shortage of rice. I remember going to Costco and they were saying you could only buy 1 bag of rice. There was a worldwide shortage of rice. Gee, I wonder why there was a shortage of rice. Gee, I wonder what revolutions those started. Do you want to know why so many problems are in Syria right now? Rice. Okay, in the United States, we spend about 50% of our budget on food. Used to be a third, now it's about 15%. What do you think the percentage of people, or the percentage people pay in Syria for food? Almost 90% of their income. If the price of rice and other food doubles, what happens? You starve. And what happens when you starve?
Yeah.
Only you revolt. You want to know why Syria is like it is? It's not ISIS. It's not religion. It was greed. And that's derivatives. Now, once again, let me say this. Derivatives, except for and get this down to your thing, this is actually pretty important. Derivatives were illegal for most things. It was illegal. Because of what they were illegal.
I was saying, were they illegal or are they still illegal?
Oh, of course they're not. Well, actually, it's not. I'm exaggerating. But for what I just told you, speculators can corner the market on goods that we need. This happened in Bolivia for water. People don't need water, so don't worry about it. Oh, I should add. This is a big deal of what's going to happen in Quebec. They're trying to buy all the water futures in Quebec. Quebec has most of the fresh water in the world. And if that happens, especially with climate change,
Oh, no.
wow. Yes.
During the gas prices, when the gas prices were so high in Canada, it was so expensive that people would, it was almost easier for people to drive down in the United States to buy gasoline for their vehicles in Canada and then drive back up to Canada.
Yeah, Canada, because it affected the whole world market.
It was like somewhere of $6 Canadian per liter.
So let me get back to the derivative then. What happened was, in the 1980s, during the deregulation under the Reagan administration, what they did is, they took, only way to look at it is like they gave certain licenses to certain investment banks to buy derivatives. So what happened? Well, not all of them. Not very many banks bought them. But what has happened since the 80s is this. How many banks are there now?
A lot.
Two.
Very, very few.
Really?
Only a few banks control the entire market. So before, it was a few banks who were doing it, but there was a lot of other investment banks. We've had consolidation and we now are controlled by, not quite monopolies, but oligopolies. What's an oligopoly?
Many monopolies.
It's a, so like an oligarchy in government. But what happened was this. We only have a few investment banks, and guess what every investment bank could do? Buy derivatives. So it used to be, and people warned that this will happen in the local corner of the market. And people are like, no, your regulations are actually stifling our creativity to make money and expand business. Now, derivatives actually do make sense if you have, like by farm analogy, but they can also be used. They also have been used many times for that. Well, I went through a lot here, didn't I? Did that help a little bit on? By the way, the encyclopedia economic reports.
Investopedia.
Are there any questions? We'll start the movie on Monday. Any other questions? By the way, is this all clear now? Does everyone understand exactly what happened? Oh, how do you ever control this if it's like that? What's short selling? Got short selling on that?
Yeah.
What's short selling?
Selling stocks.
Yes. But there's a way of doing it. It's a really specific way of doing it. You're on the right track. You want to sell it before. Now let's say, okay, this is how you short sell. You ready? This is how you short sell. You're trying to make money off of stock values drop. So let's say I wanted to short sell. I would go, let's say, to Daniel, who's a big investor. And I rent his stocks from him. Literally, I rent them. How do I rent them? I buy them from you plus interest. I'm not going to pay you back now, but I buy them from you plus interest. Now, let's say your stocks of, what, amalgamated gadgets. I don't know. But they're $100 a stock. I buy one stock. Why not? And I give you 5% interest. I take that stock. So I bought it from you, right?
Yeah.
And then what do I do?
You're gonna sell it.
I sell it right away for $100. I get the $100. And then what do? I sit back, this is shorting it. I wait for the stock value to drop. And let's say it tanks and goes down to 80. Then what do?
You buy it back.
I buy it back. I pay you back all the money plus interest and pocket 15%.
You just got $20 from it.
Now, you actually made money too without doing anything.
Oh, you're right.
You didn't do anything.
Except for the person who has the stock.
Now wait. That's shorting. Wait. What's naked short selling? Calm down. What's naked short selling? Wait. Here's the best part. And this is what we call technically illegal. I want to short your stock. So what do? I tell somebody that I have your stock and I sell it.
You don't have this, but you don't have it yet.
No. Huh?
That just sounds like true.
Say, I couldn't hear you. What was that? It's very illegal. It happens all the time. So, but do you see what happened then? I shorted his stock and made the money off it without ever having the stock.
And all of a sudden.
So what you can do then, Marcus, is you can sell to someone else, it'll tank, you can come back, you actually don't have that stock, and then when someone confronts you, like, well, I never bought their stock, I don't know what you're talking about.
You're on the right track, but you know what else I could do? I could take that stock that I don't have and chop it up into little bits.
Oh,
No. Kind of nice.
Paper trail.
I think so. I think the whole one.
So, is anybody want to get into finance? And I'll tell you this too, most people who are like your financial brokers, I'm not saying they don't know all the details of it, because they have, you know, a lot know a lot, and a lot don't. But this is not what they do. We're talking in a few little rooms in New York City. Yes.
So, is this, all.
White House. Oh, and it's really stuff like this because how do you know what's what? College, you know, anything like that, it's crazy. Partially because of the way they're funded. It's just crazy. All right. Okay, so I want everyone to get involved in the CDO market by Monday.
Okay.
Yeah. You're welcome. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot. All this sounds bad, but you need something. Something has to put money into people's hands. You can't have these things if people aren't making money. I mean, you got to have something like a bubble. Gee, I wonder if there'll be a bubble in the 2000s. In what? In what? Real estate. So all this is bad, but you need the bubble. Actually, you know, the Sumerians tried to cut that through the law.
We already have.
You have a big supply of votes? By the way, good job. Yeah, your mom is. Oh yeah. Well, you know, if you look at the other places, you know, Shanghai, Tokyo, Frankfurt, London too. The city, what's it called? The city. That's the financial data.
Well,
And if you go to London, don't go to the city.
what if one of the major ones go down?
Yeah. If one major one, okay, that's what they would go a lot of banks. If one big bank would go down, now we got so many banks.
Oh, if one big goes down.
Yeah, you know, this city bank goes down. That's awesome. They look great.
Thank you.
Brown. It looks good. Beige. I like it. It's tan and brown. That's really nice. The red on top. See, we're admiring that. I made those.
Yeah, really?
That's really cool. How's it going? Good. How are you doing? Good.
Yeah, they love Western stuff. I'll try to make the Western response.
I think it looks really well. That's good. I like it.
That's why.
You know, I might visit it tomorrow. Oh, I didn't realize you were coming. I didn't know why. No, they're good ones. They're good ones.
Not the last year though, right?
Not even close. They're kind of zeros, but you know, it's all right. Have a good weekend. That's right.
Yes.